Hi comrade. If you're watching this video, it's likely that you have some spare cash and you're wondering which camera to buy now in 2020. So many good cameras have been announced recently. Canon R5 with its 8K video, Sony a7S III that I've been waiting for since childhood it seems. But how about to save you some money? There's a camera out there that can do 4K 10-bit 422 color internal 1080p 180 frames per second. It has a flippy LCD screen, amazing image stabilization, and is only worth around $1,500. If you're wondering, how come I've never heard about this camera before? Just keep watching, because that's the camera I'm recording on right now, and I've been using it for about 3 years. So this is Panasonic GH-5 in 2020, and this is Two Dudes. So I bought this camera about 3 years ago, and before buying this camera I had never done video professionally, so that was kind of my first experience. Ever since then I got to use many different cameras, both professional and from this sort of prosumer segment, but I keep coming back to GH5. Why is that? Obviously there's a reason why GH5 is so easy to use and many filmmakers prefer it to some more capable cameras. So let me list all the pros and cons of this camera as I see them one by one. Overheating, or should I say the complete lack of it. Now for this point I'm going to compare GH5 with Sony a7 III. That's another camera that I've been using for about a year now. You can see over here how much bigger GH5's body is compared to Sony a7 III. And this is the comparison of sensor sizes. Obviously with that body to sensor size ratio, GH5 is much better at heat dissipation, so it doesn't require any extra cooling like bigger cinema cameras, Arri Alexa or Red. George has recorded a great video here where he compares Sony a7 III to the new Sony a7S III that has solved this problem, it seems. And he shares his experience with overheating. GH5 you can take pretty much to the middle of the desert, and I'm talking Australian desert, and record hours and hours of continuous 4K video without any overheating issues. The next point is obviously the color. That's what GH5 has been praised for. It can record 10-bit color, 422 sampling, 4K internal with all-eye encoding. So that's impressive, isn't it? This is something that full-frame cameras are only starting to embrace, and GH5 had that for about, 3 years now? What's all the fuss about this 10-bit color? Look, basically 10-bit means that you have much more wiggle room when it comes to color grading. I've recorded these two videos, one in 8-bit and this one is in 10-bit. And when I do this color grading, look how much color bending I'm getting in the 8-bit case. 12 stops of dynamic range in Vlog. Needless to say, dynamic range is something that makes your video cinematic more than anything else. GH5 obviously can't reach the height of Sony a7S III that claims to have about up to 15 stops of dynamic range, I think. That's something very impressive, but still, 12 stops of dynamic range is very, very good. Panasonic's menu and overall camera experience. Seriously, to me it's so important that I put it above pretty much anything else. It's probably second only to Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, which is very straightforward, but it's still up there with Canon and the likes of Canon. This point also includes the set of video features that GH5 has. This is pretty much unique to Panasonic cameras in this segment. You can get features like waveform monitor or shutter angle instead of shutter speed, and many, many more. And that makes your overall experience just very good. I pretty much agree with Matthew Hapoy when he says that in 2020 there's no excuse for cameras to not have a flippy LCD screen. Obviously it's not the best in class, but it's nice for what it is and what it provides, and I really appreciate it. I don't subscribe to the idea that you always have to use an external LCD screen. In some situations it's just not very convenient. When you do this run and gun filmmaking, any extra weight can be an obstacle. I'm yet to see a camera even now in 2020 that has better IBIS than Panasonic GH5. Obviously that is something that comes out of the box with a smaller sensor. I'm also yet to see an independent filmmaker that doesn't do any handheld shots. And when you do handheld, IBIS really can be a lifesaver. Look at how good it can get. Sometimes if you're really skillful, it can be mistaken for a steady cam or a gimbal shot. Pretty good battery life. I can get around 1.5 hours of continuous 4K shooting on one battery, and the batteries itself are so cheap that I have about, what, 7 of them? Last but not least is obviously the price. Of course, it's not $10, but the amount of value that you get for the price is just overwhelming. Now you might be wondering, if the camera is so great, why isn't everyone buying it? Well, there are a few downsides. This one's a big one, and I think for many run-and-gun filmmakers, this would be the reason why they wouldn't choose GH5. That's continuous autofocus. It's really terrible. Even with all the firmware updates, it remains the worst in class, in my opinion. It's so bad that I pretty much never use it. It makes it more like a gimmick to me. Now that only applies to continuous autofocus. One touch shot autofocus, still okay, so you can still use it to kind of set up your shot, but continuous autofocus, please refrain from using it. It's completely unreliable. Terrible low light performance. That's the flip side of the smaller sensor. Enough said, I guess. With ISOs ranging from 400 to 800, it's pretty good, minimum amount of noise. When you go to around 1600, that's where you get a lot of noise, and that becomes kind of borderline unusable. Above 1600, I never use it unless it's a private video that I shoot for myself, and I just want to keep it as a memory, and I don't mind any extra noise, but it's really bad. Small sensor itself, now that is an interesting one, because to me personally that is not a downside. I don't see it as a downside per se, but many people do. And the reason they see it as a downside is because with a smaller sensor, it's hard to achieve this so desirable shallow depths of field. And in many people's opinion, that's what makes picture more cinematic. Obviously, that is arguable. I find it quite pleasant, but not necessarily something that I want all the time. You can still get the shallow depths of field, but for that you have to have a very wide iris on your lens. Like this shot currently I'm shooting with f1.3. This is where wide depths of field can actually help you, because it's not that easy to miss focus when your depth of field is so wide. And if you close your iris down to a 4 or a 5, in most situations, you're golden. Low light. Now that is not something that I run into very often. Sometimes when I shoot videos for my other YouTube channel, yes, in those situations it can be very difficult, but for commercial shoots I just use a combination of controlled lighting and a faster lens, and most of the time I'm good. Shallow depth of field is overrated, that's my personal opinion, and many people tend to agree. So I try to kind of avoid it unless I really need it. If I need it, I can get a different camera, or I can get a faster lens, just open the iris and get this so desired shallow depth of field. Most of the time you can get away without it. I think if I say that the reason why many aspiring filmmakers such as myself choose to stick with GH5 and Lumix as a brand is because of this great combination of reliability of a cinema camera, usability of a consumer level camera, and a great set of video features. That would be pretty accurate. I absolutely don't mean to say that if you have more money and you desire to do so, you shouldn't go and just pick up a better camera. But what I want to express is that I think GH5 is still a great camera now in 2020. It's still going strong even after 3 years in the business. And I think the amount of value that it packs for the amount of money that you pay for it is very good. That is all for today, dudes. Pressing the like button is a good way to show your appreciation for two Russian dudes desperately trying to make it on the English segment of YouTube. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get notified whenever we release a new video. See you next time.